now tapped in with the introspective father and son duo. Last name may be strange, but never strangers to the game. Adjust the listening devices and keep it loud.
Coming in, flex. I just wanna win, LABB, who we running with, 2233, I'm on 10 again, state your name.
Hello, and welcome to another installment of No Strangers to the Game. In today's episode, we're going to be debriefing on this past week's events at the Capitol and the riot that took place. Just for a little bit of background, this week, January 6th, there was a rally held by President Trump near the Capitol in which he talked to his supporters about, what he's been talking about for the past few weeks, which is that, the election results are false or, are not certified and therefore shouldn't have been certified, which is what was taking place in the Capitol at the time of the riot. A faction of, the rally members, literally broke into the Capitol and, I guess in a roundabout way, raised hell.
Tried to overturn the election.
Yeah, realistically. So the first question I have for you is, how does this weekend's event shed light on hypocrisy in America, which I think is something that a lot of different groups and a lot of different people in America have known about for a long time, but it's never been so blatantly, obvious to a larger group in America?
Well, I think this past week demonstrates the access that, white folks have to law enforcement, legislators, and obviously getting a pass in doing treacherous things, whereas Black folks or people of color would have been treated differently. Probably wouldn't have made it to the steps. They would have been a lot more security. It'd have been tighter, knowing that, hey, there was a possibility of some uprising or protest in this area. And being that the Capitol building, and I've been in, going to the courthouse, it's hard to get in the courthouse without being shaken down and having all those protocols. So you're talking about a government building where you're going into where there's cameras everywhere, there's all type of checkpoints. You have serious protection to get into that building. And as I understand it, and I've been kind of listening and reading the different things, that they have about 2,200 Capitol Police. From what I was reading, I heard that only 500 showed up that day. Yeah. So there was ultimately an inside job where people on the inside, whether it be law enforcement, whether it be legislators or whomever, gave that crowd of people access to that building with the intent to stop the certification. So for me, that wasn't something that just a bunch of people who was mad just showed up one day and got in that building. And the more importantly, from what I understand, that building it's not so easy to get around that building. There's a lot of different moving parts, tunnels, and for them to know exactly where to go and have access to leads me to believe that that was something that happened internally with the intention on stopping that election certification.
Yeah, it's funny. One of the things that I read, the jokes that was made on Twitter, was everybody was asking, where were the police when all of this was going down? They said, well, you don't ask where Miley Cyrus is when Hannah Montana is on stage. And I know you're a little older, so you may not get that. Hannah Montana and Miley Cyrus are the same person.
Right. Right.
So basically making the statement that those policemen, like you kind of alluded to, is those policemen were a part of it. And they're those same kind of folks. And so,
and law enforcement, veterans and various people who, understand the inner workings of that particular building and in that location and how to get things done and maneuver and get access.
It's funny because throughout history, and I don't mean to sound really, I guess, blunt when I say this, but white folks have done very messed up things. But it's weird because you have never looked at them as an angry group. They just conquered just to conquer. But in recent history and recent events, I think you can look at least white folks in America and say they're upset. They're not too happy. And this weekend's events kind of, I guess, were not all, once again, not all, but definitely a faction of, them are upset. Why do you think this is?
I think this has been happening over several decades. As manufacturing base has declined, jobs being shipped overseas, the economy shifting from a manufacturing base to more service industry, the tech industry, to where those jobs are no longer really being produced here, and they have been shipped off overseas. So you had a group, particularly in middle America, who had good middle class income to where they can take care of their families and themselves, didn't necessarily need to go to college and get a college degree. And now that has changed, it's a little unsettling. Not only the fact that, economically their, situation has changed in many cases, but also you have the blackening and browning of America. And so now you're not only saying, well, economically, I'm not doing what I was doing in the past. Now I have immigrants and other people who I feel are guests in my country and not fully citizens.
Yeah.
They're getting the jobs, they're taking the resources that I would normally get, which is not true. When you talk about immigrants coming in here, unless they're in the high tech industry and other places like that, many of them they don't have their own businesses, or they're out in the fields. They're doing jobs that, white folks have never really done on a grand scale. You know what I mean? They may have their own farms and they've done things of that nature, but the heavy lifting in agriculture over the years have been through either slavery or immigrants coming over and doing those type of jobs. But what has happened is that the media has also had a hand in shaping and creating that anger, because you have the media on the right and the media on the left. And so what's happening is that if I'm on the left and I'm listening to those news channels that slant their news to the left, then my perspective is that anything on the right is evil and I need to destroy it. And the same thing is happening on the right. And so you're looking at information and you're getting your news in a silo to where it's very myopic, and it causes you to build this mistrust and this anger of the other side. And that's one of the things that happened. And then on top of all that, right, they look up and they see that these corporations are getting bailed out. You got these elite class of people who are becoming multi-billionaires, and our situation is continuing to decline. And that's not only white folks, but black folks and everybody in between. So you have a very small percentage of people who are making multi-millions of dollars and into the billions. And then you have the rest that are continuing to see their life and economic status, waste away. And so I think those are the things that causing that anger. But the thing also that has caused them to act on that anger is you have an individual who is charismatic, who comes at the right time and let them know that you guys are getting a bad deal. Yeah. Your government, your legislators have not been taking care of you. I'm the one who's going to come and change that. And so on the appearance, this is a guy who appears to be over time successful and a billionaire and ran many businesses, and many would question how successful he has really been. But on the outside looking in, he has been successful, right? And so he comes and say, I'm for you, and begin to have faith, because I've lost faith in our government. I've lost faith in our system because of what has happened over the last, several decades. And now I have someone here who has appeared to be business savvy, who considers to be an outsider, and they're saying all the right things. So what happened on last week was not necessarily a fight to save the country, but a fight for Donald Trump, so that they believe that he would be able to solve a lot of their problems. And does that make sense?
Yeah, it's funny as you talk about this. There's a joke that Dave Chappelle tells. We'll call it, he says, black folk lesson. He uses different words, but it's funny because he talks about how, obviously black folks in this country have gone through a lot and have dealt with things constantly. And now that some of the things you discussed are happening to the other side, they upset about it. And it's like, it's funny because we looking around like, oh, you don't like the socioeconomic inequities of our country. Welcome to how we feel. You don't like, you're taking your anger out by using drugs, and the opioid crisis is affecting your communities. Welcome to how we felt. So, it's a obviously sad thing, but it's like, for those of us in this, and I'm only 22 years old, I haven't been around that long, but for, I guess, a community of people who have been through what our community has been through, we look at it, it's tough for us to have sympathy.
No, I mean, it's tough to have sympathy because even in light of those circumstances,
we're still being affected.
We're being affected, but we're being mistreated in the process. We're not saying, okay, we have empathy for your plight. This is what we're going to do to help solve that. And then in some cases, you have some organizations and people who do those things, but overall, it hasn't really been effective. And so when you look and you compare the crack epidemic, where those who use crack and sold crack, they went to jail.
Yeah.
Then you take the opioid epidemic and you have those who use it, they get rehab and they get treatment.
Yeah, they're sick.
And so I understand and I empathize with that because I know what it feels like to have family members and friends that are addicted to drugs and they're not the same person that you knew.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, I look at it and it's like, but I still got folks locked up for that. And on top of that, now with the marijuana, now it's legal. And I had people that have been locked up and are still locked up for something now that is legal for, other class of people to come and become multimillionaires and make a lot of money. So it's really one of those things where you see the hypocrisy, and that's the part that is most upsetting for me when I think about what happened, last week. I'm not a fan of what they did, and I can understand people being upset, and I can understand people, wanting to voice their opinion. And I disagree wholeheartedly with what they did. But the part that bothers me the most is the fact that they were allowed and given access to that. And it was an inside job. And so those are the things that really stand out to me, is that somebody on the inside who had control and had a sense of power was able to allow them to get that close to really, turning over our government. And I don't know what would have happened had they been able to accomplish what they, tried to do, but it don't seem like it would have been good.
Yeah, and to kind of, I guess, reiterate, that wasn't just a few people being angry. That was treason. Those were treasonous acts, and they were trying to overturn a lawful election in this country. There was nothing, I guess, minimal about what they did. It was a very big deal. And
absolutely,
if they were successful, and I guess whatever they were trying to do, it would have had big implications. But I guess what that kind of means is, and we talk about the hypocrisy, it's funny how, the thing that I've found most interesting about what happened this past week is that it was so evident, the hypocrisy, because of literally just 6 months ago, you had Black Lives Matter protests and the protests for social justice, where we're fighting for human rights. And, there is backlash, there is, all of these issues that arose from that.
National Guard, there's, police and law enforcement armed and in military, gear to, stop those protests. And, I'm of a belief that if you're doing something that's out of line, protesting is one thing, and I don't advocate people burning buildings and looting and all that. And a lot of that was done by some people who came from the outside, as I could see on social media. But anyway, whoever was involved in that part of it should have been prosecuted to the full extent of the law. That happened. In this case, the same thing should happen. Whoever went in there and did what they did, I don't care why you was in there. You went in there and you was caught. That's like, my mom would say, if you out somewhere and your friends get in trouble, you're going to be in trouble with them because you with them. You're guilty by association. So I don't want to hear the excuses. You was in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I have many people that I know was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they did a lot of time in jail.
But the fact that there are even people out there that would, I guess, defend their actions, and even some cases call it patriotism, it's insanity to me. But does it allude to a greater phenomenon we have in this country of subconscious hypocrisy. Subconscious hypocrisy, where people will judge, another group or other folks for doing something and then turn around and do it for, in my opinion, sometimes a lesser reason, and feel like they're right because they're hypocrites.
Yeah, I use the analogy as a home, right? In my home, I can do certain things that I won't allow guests to come and do. And I think sometimes, or I wouldn't say sometimes, I think that probably is the issue, is that many of those people who did what they did on that day, I would imagine many of them look at people of color, Black people in particular, as not full citizens. And so when you come in my house, there's certain rules you need to follow that I don't necessarily need to follow because it's my house. And so I think that may be the attitude, whether it's conscious or subconscious, is that they don't view many of us as full citizens of this country.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, these are things that but our community, once again, I'm only 22, but our community have understood for a long time. But I think these recent events where these outbursts of, I guess you could call it white rage, has made things so evident of like, this is the stuff we've been going through for years and y'all told us to sit down and be quiet. And now you guys are causing all types of issues because you're going through some of it, not even all of it, but just a piece of it. So that's an interesting idea to me. With that being said, I wanted to get into kind of a deeper, I guess, idea of the framework of America, right? Mm-hmm. When we talk about subconscious hypocrisy, when the framework of our country was written and, people were doing things to try to set up how we were going to run our country, people like you and I were not taken into consideration.
Right.
We weren't even considered human. So in that way, they, didn't see themselves as doing anything wrong when they did.
3/5.
Yeah.
Not a whole human.
So with that, I guess my question is, do we need to redo the framework of this country, or is it something that we can reform and try to fix to make it equitable for everybody? Because like I said, we weren't in mind when they were creating it.
Well, although we weren't in mind when it was being created, I think the Constitution in itself, for the most part, is a solid document. Yeah. When you said, liberty and justice for all. Well, yeah, things had to be amended, but being that we all here, if that applies to all, then it works. The challenge is that the Constitution is being applied at the benefit of those who are able to administer whatever the consequences or justice to it, and able to, maneuver and manipulate it to their own benefit. And so I wouldn't say that needs to be reformed. There may be some things, and I haven't read the whole document, that could probably be adjusted. I don't know. But based on what I know of it, it seems to be pretty solid in terms of laying out certain things. I think our economics system needs to be really looked at, because what you're having is this increasing growth in inequity, and how you have, like I said, Elon Musk, close to $200 billion. Amazon, Bezos, almost that type of money is insane. And you have individuals who literally have nothing. Now, I'm not saying everybody needs to make the same amount of money and everybody, I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about having the access to the same opportunities that a Bezos had and others who had. Now, you got to work and you got to put in the effort to make things happen for yourself, but having that opportunity. So not because I live in a certain community or neighborhood that my schools will be lesser, and then then I won't have the education, and the opportunities become limited to what I can do because of the environment that I'm growing up in and that I live in. And so those are the type of things that I look at and say, we need to figure out how to reform that part of our country. Now, I don't have all the answers, but there's a lot of smart people out there who've been doing economics for many, many years who probably can help figure that out. Mm-hmm. I also think that, with our condition, particularly in the Black community, as a result of slavery, need to really consider reparations, because there's a lot that this country and many families of this country benefited from on the backs of Black people enslaved.
And that's an interesting thing, because like for me, that seems to be not that it'll solve every issue we have,
right.
but that can mend a lot of, brokenness and hopefully repair a lot of what was, the damage that was caused, is in a way a redistribution of wealth. And because it feels like, at least from my perspective, as we see in the Black community, there are people who get out, I guess you could say, who come up, get educated, make good money, and do what they do. But I don't think you'll ever see, I guess a level playing field, or, a level distribution of wealth until we make it happen, until we literally do it. Because if you have a group that's literally getting a head start, the other ones will be behind, and you'll have, some that make it. But I guess on average, there will always be a group that's behind because the other one had a head start.
And especially when it comes to wealth and economics, those provide this power. And what that does is it allows you access. And it also allows you to limit others to have that access, because you can control the legislation. So you send lobbyists, say, I'm a big corporation, and hey, I'm building cars, and you got to put out this law that every car needs an airbag. Well, that's going to cost me X amount of dollars. I don't really want that. Here you go. I need y'all to go over here and figure that out. As with other things, now I have a vehicle that's coming out that's going to be more economic, that's going to be better on the environment, but that means I got to change my whole game up. I don't want to do that. I need y'all to go over there and figure that out. Here's some money, because we don't want that vehicle. The electric vehicle, from what I understand, could have been out earlier, in probably the 1980s and 1990s, but because of the big auto makers, they was like, that ain't what we do. That's going to change how we do things. Until, the other companies came out, like the Teslas and some of the, automakers that decided, it makes sense. And this is where we have an increasing demand. Let's do it. But until that point, it's like, no, that's not what we do. And it's going to impact our bottom line.
One thing that I think we can do, I guess, even more short-term than, a long-term redistribution of wealth and reparations, is a redistribution of power in those that, create laws or in the power structure of our country. I think we have a very antiquated system, and it's tough because it's like, this country is run by old white men, and it has been since the beginning of this country. And that's old. That's not, I think, a real representation of our country anymore. But how do you can't just tell all these white folk that y'all got to go. We're going to bring in some new, new. And I know we do it through voting and stuff like that, but there's got to be something we can do to make sure that our power structure in this country is better at representing the demographic of our country.
Yeah. I mean, I think it really just comes down to organizing, and those who feel that's disenfranchised or feel like they have been left out of the conversation and, limited in their power, organizing, because this country still runs off of money and resources, and so there's a lot of things that have been done, the civil rights movement, when, hey, you don't want us to ride in the back of a bus, guess what? We won't ride the bus. Yeah. Now, your bus company is having economic issues. So you're going to come to the table because although you don't want me riding your bus, you want even less not to have your buses running. We prefer to have your buses running than where I sit on it. And so you have to leverage yourself when you have the power and you have the ability to say, look, you got to come to the table. If I don't eat, you don't eat. And whoever that is, if they got some common sense, they're going to say, I'd rather share 50% than get 100% of nothing.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you to put on your, I guess, look into the future hat now. Will America ever reach the promise that it's, I guess, made at the very beginning, which is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for everyone?
That's a heck of a question. With the way that it's going now, it seems, very slim. That the chances are slim that happens. But also I want to be optimistic and believe in humanity and people, that at some point they're going to look up and say that if we continue down this path, if it ain't already too late, then we're all going to be in trouble, regardless of what color and how much money I got. If the community, the society, and in which we live in becomes so, backwards and so difficult to live in and challenging, it affects everyone. So I think, and I'm hoping that people will step back, and I see some of it happening with some of the elite multi-billionaire tech guys, because they're looking at what they're creating with the technology, and they're saying that we're going to be pushing people out of jobs.
Yeah.
And how do we live comfortably if nobody buys our products? Yeah. If nobody has the ability to live in a way that which it's even humane. So I think at the end of the day, they're looking at it. Have you heard of universal basic income?
Yeah, you're talking about it.
So essentially, where everybody gets a certain amount of money to live on every month, regardless of what they're working or not, but there is money given to them so that they can have their basic needs met. So those are things that's being talked about now in this country that, years ago you'd have been.
Because I was about to say, what that sounds like, and a lot of people probably just have when as soon as that an idea even close to that comes up, they're just ready to throw it out.
And there's some cities and I know Stockton, California did a trial with a few individuals or certain families. I think it's 500 families or so, which they would give them a certain amount of money every month just to see how that would impact their lives. Yeah. But these are initiatives that are being introduced by, like I said, elite tech, multi-millionaire individuals who are seeing what automation, artificial intelligence, and all those things are going to do.
Because their survival is dependent on it as well, even though they have it all, basically.
So what do you do if I don't need you to go do work? Well, if you don't work in this country and in most countries, you don't eat. Yeah. So how do you fill that gap? What are the things that we can do? So I think there's hope, but I think there's some people at the top. And I think that this younger generation are starting to see things from a more social equity, just perspective, so that they say, okay, how do we have all these homeless people? And how do we have all these different disparities that we can solve? Yeah. And so they're creating companies that are providing, a look and a perspective on economic injustice, social injustice, so that can create an environment that everyone can, have a chance at being successful, or at least living, to a human standard.
Yeah. Last question, and this is an interesting one. As I sit here today, I think there are two views that you can have about the divisiveness in America and the division, I guess. It's that one, we've slowly made progress for the last 50, 60 years, and things are coming to a head. Optimistically, this is kind of that breaking point, and we'll push past it, and we'll keep making progress, and things will just keep getting better. Pessimistically, we headed towards a race war. What do you think is more realistic?
Yeah, I don't even want to put that out there. I mean, in the near future, right now, I mean, I would have to go with, the latter, a race war. If things continue to move in the direction that it is, I would not even so much a race war, but a civil war, because it's not just, you have people who are racist and they're against Black folks. They're really angry at our system. Those who are in position as elected officials, they feel like they have been betrayed by these individuals. Like I said, you go back, hey, you bailed out these companies who are worth billions of dollars, and you left me to lose my house. You left me to lose my business. And when you think about this whole pandemic, there was Amazon and Walmart, during this time, they've made $116 billion. And during that same time, you had businesses that have gone under because of the way it's been handled. So there's a reason for the anger, and in a lot of ways it's just, but how it's handled and the way that people who are angry are being led and who they're being led by is what the real concern is. Because from what I can see and just looking at, Donald Trump, he don't seem to have any interest in anyone but himself.
Yeah.
Even after he went and had this rally, told these people to march to the Capitol building, he was going to go down there with them. He went to the White House or wherever he was, and we watched it on TV. And then he turned around the following day and he denounced those people and told them that they would be prosecuted because they were intruders. I mean, that's one of those things where you look up and you're like, well, damn. And everybody that's been around him, other than his family and kids, he has turned on them. Yeah. And so on the outside looking in, that's a bad mix. So what do they do? I mean, it's almost like a cult when you talk about following Donald Trump. Yeah. But our government, this system has failed a lot of us, most of us, the majority of us, black and white, and any other color in between, because they have looked out for themselves and they looked out for big business, these global corporations. And as a result, the greed has created a wealth gap, and it has created inequities that are continuing to grow if we don't do something with our economic system to change that.
Yeah. To end the show on a more positive, like, as an individual entity, just people walking around, that's really all it is, right? We're just humans walking around on this earth. What does each person do to try to fix things? Whether you're a doctor, a lawyer, or a homeless man, what does each person try to do to, I guess, make our country and this world a better place to live in?
Well, I think it all starts with dealing with your own self. Whatever the traumatic experiences, issues that you have, look to address those. That way you can be a whole being that's able to look at the world in a more objective manner, and you're not taking your baggage and dumping it on the rest of the world. But also you begin to love yourself and you understand yourself, and you can have empathy and compassion for others when you see someone hurting or someone in a bad situation, that you will offer the help. And I would say the majority of the people in this country and the world are probably that way. And I just think that you have these people on the fringes that create this animosity, you create this distrust and the chaos for whatever reason. And so I think just people working together, organizing, looking out for one another, and, having love, and that to me is probably the most critical thing you can do, is find love. But first by loving yourself and those people around you, your community, your family, and helping to build them up and put them in the positions where they could be successful and they can have access to the opportunities that they need to reach their full potential. And so it's going to take, people making those sacrifices, within their family and themselves to be able to do that also within their community.
Yeah, well, you heard it here first. It all starts with love. I think that's, a good way to end this episode, is it all starts with love, and each and every one of us has some of that to give to ourselves as well as others. So appreciate you for tuning into this episode as well as past episodes, and hope you keep listening.
Peace.
Make sure you like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you're notified every time we post a video.